Welcome to the Compliance 911 Show, a no-nonsense podcast discussing hot topics for today's busy compliance professional. It's everything you wanted to know about regulatory compliance, but we're afraid to ask. And now, here are your hosts, Dean Stockford of M&M Consulting and Len Suzio of Geodata Vision.
Hey, Len, great to see you. What's the topic for today's podcast?
Well, Dean, it's becoming increasingly clear that the Trump administration is serious about deregulation. And because Dodd-Frank Section 1071 and the 2023 CRA rule are currently being litigated, they both present a very high profile in the world of bureaucratic regulations. And I'm certain they have the attention of the Trump administration. I expect that, like the Biden administration that preceded them, the Trump-appointed regulators will announce they intend to reconsider the 2023 CRA rule and the Section 1071 rule, and they will issue a notice of proposed rulemaking that will consider rescinding and revising both rules. The Biden administration did exactly that when the OCC repealed the OCC 2020 CRA rule. Within 5 months of Biden taking office, the OCC announced a notice of proposed rulemaking regarding the 2020 CRA rule, and before the year 2021 had passed, the 2020 CRA rule was rescinded and the legacy CRA rule reinstated. Eventually, of course, as you know, in 2023, the regulators passed the so-called modern CRA rule. So the precedent's been set for the Trump administration to do the same thing. What I would like to discuss today is that the banking community should be anticipating this development and prepare to make sure that both the 2023 CRA rule and the Section 1071 rule are repealed and reformulated in a much more effective and less burdensome format. In the case of the Section 1071 rule, it may be necessary for the administration to simultaneously repeal and replace that rule because the courts have ordered that the CFPB promulgate a Section 1071 rule. It may not be possible to repeal the current 1071 rule without a simultaneous replacement. You know, they say there's three kinds of people in the world, Dean: those who make things happen, those who watch what happened, and those who wonder what happened. It's important for bankers to be in that very first group.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly certain that you've got the attention of the audience, Len. So how should bankers be prepared to support this regulatory reform or potential regulatory reform?
Well, today I'm going to focus on the 2023 CRA rule, which has some very, very serious problems. In fact, I would characterize some of those problems as fatal problems because they destroy the reliability of the performance ratings in the 2023 CRA rule. I'm going to present the issues that bankers should raise if there is a notice of proposed rulemaking regarding the 2023 CRA rule, as I expect to happen this summer. I'm hoping today's discussion will be a sort of Cliff's Notes, if you will, for bankers and regulators, for that matter, to prepare for the reform of the 2023 CRA rule. So the first and most significant problem, this is the extremely critical problem of the new assessment area rules. As any regulatory compliance professional knows or should know, the 2023 CRA rule radically changed the rules governing assessment area delineation. The new rule introduces an artificial requirement for large bank facility-based assessment areas. For the last 30 years, the regulation has allowed a bank to delineate a CRA assessment area that can be modified to reflect the area that a bank, quote, can reasonably be expected to serve. That's a reasonable and correct approach. But the new rule, as applies to large banks, those with assets of $2 billion or greater, mandates that a bank cannot incorporate anything less than entire counties within its facility-based assessment areas, no matter how impractical or how impossible it is to serve an entire county. A good example, a large bank can have one deposit-taking branch in LA County with 2,494 census tracts and will be expected to demonstrate that it's meeting the needs for credit for the entire county. It's all but impossible and therefore meaningless. As I have explained in many webinars and published articles, the configuration of a CRA assessment area is the most important decision a bank can make because it not only affects a bank's results, it also determines the performance context, which drives the performance benchmarks used to rate a bank's performance. An unrealistic assessment area means unrealistic performance standards, which means meaningless and maybe even misleading performance test results. Now, is there anyone who wants arbitrary and capricious performance standards? I would argue that this is a highly destructive and dangerous and undermines any confidence in the performance test results produced by the 2023 CRA rule.
Aren't there 2 assessment areas in the new rule, and how do those affect that CRA performance evaluation?
You're right. There's actually 2 additional assessment areas. So there's 3 in total, Dean, and I want to address the implications for that as well. In addition to the facility-based assessment areas, the 2023 CRA rule creates the retail lending assessment areas that consist of nothing less than an entire MSA or statewide non-MSA. Banks are compelled to designate those areas where they have originated at least 150 closed-end mortgages or 400 small business loans in each of the 2 previous years. A bank's closest branch could be more than 1,000 miles away, but the bank will need to demonstrate they are meeting the need for credit services in these remote areas and very large communities. The regulators tout that the performance benchmarks are, quote, tailored benchmarks, but they aren't tailored to adjust for the significant competitive disadvantages of competing in a market with institutions that do have facilities in the market. The tailored benchmarks are not adjusted to reflect the competitive realities of markets far removed from a bank's branches. This makes for unfair performance comparisons. Now, there's also a new, more radical concept, believe it or not, called the outside retail lending area, or the ORLA for short. Under this concept, any MSA or statewide non-MSA that is not included in the facility-based assessment areas or the retail lending assessment areas, and in which the bank originates one or more major product line loans, is also subject to performance tests. And you heard that right. Only one loan in a given MSA can precipitate that being a part of the ORLA, the outside retail lending area. Yeah. So a New York bank could originate a single residential closed-end mortgage in LA County, and its performance meeting the needs of the entire LA MSA has to be evaluated. This concept, it's so extreme it can be characterized as what I would call silly, but it's very real. Once again, the tailored benchmarks are not tailored to reflect reality. Not only that, but what is the point of evaluating such insignificant activity in the first place? I mean, this supposedly is a very small part of a bank's lending activity, but it's got to be evaluated no matter how remote it is to the bank's true market. So, and by the way, the proof in the pudding that the new assessment area rules are highly destructive can be found in the imputed institutional failure rates for CRA exams conducted from 2018 to 2020 and presented in the preamble of the 2023 CRA rule. Whereas a historic failure rate, institutional failure rate for CRA exams has been about 1.3% since the beginning of the century, the imputed failure rates as presented in the 2023 CRA preamble would be 9.2%. That's right. 8 to 9 times the historic experience of failure rate in CRA exams. So this is significant. And and by the way, when computed based on the performance in the retail lending assessment areas, the imputed failure rate was 22.4%. And for the ORLA, it was 28.8%. So you can see that this is going to have an enormous impact on banks' performance ratings. And if bankers don't act to protect themselves now, they're going to be in a lot of trouble in only another year when the 2023 CRA rule is expected to become put into effect.
Yeah, I'm sure a vast majority of our audience has passed out by now, fainted after listening to that. But certainly sounds like this 23 CRA rules assessment configuration requirement will be devastating to the bank performance evaluation. And that's not guessing. I mean, that's just based on the conclusions of the regulators and what you just talked about. So, wow.
That's right.
Wow.
Yep, it's right there in the preamble that the regulators have produced to the new 2023 CRA rule. So this is very real. It's a serious threat to banks. And by the way, I don't care which side of the aisle you're on or who you are. We all want performance ratings that are meaningful and accurate. But getting performance ratings that are distorted and meaningless can be, and even misleading, does no good for anybody, and it'll result in many more bank CRA exam failures which is not good. We want exams that are meaningful, that do tell the story about whether a bank truly is meeting its responsibility to provide for the credit services in the communities they serve. So it's imperative that the entire industry prepare for the potential changes in the related hearings that I think will be forthcoming from the bank regulators in the Trump administration.
Yeah, I think your advice to bankers ought to be taken to heart. The banking community cannot afford to be passive about this. I mean, again, hopefully it's repealed, but you've mentioned, that there are several serious, if not fatal, flaws in the 23 CRA rule. So what else do you have in mind, Len?
Well, we have only a few minutes left in this podcast, and I want to make certain that we give the details to the bankers that they need to understand. So I think we're going to save that topic for the next podcast we do for next month. But in the meantime, I would suggest that bankers develop notes on these issues. Listen and re-listen to the issues and the points I've raised today, and get prepared so that when the NPR is proposed or published, they'll be able to send in informative and fact-based testimony when the NPR is published and the comment period is open. And I think that's going to happen sometime by the middle of this year, the middle of the summer. I would bet you dollars to donuts we're going to see a notice of proposed rulemaking regarding the 2023 CRA rule.
Well, that's sound advice, Len. I too would encourage our banking audience to start getting prepared for a dynamic year in regulatory compliance. This is Dean Stockford from M&M Consulting.
And this is Len Suzio with Geodata Vision saying, we hope you found today's podcast informative and helpful. And again, as we always say, please let us know of any topics you would like us to address in future podcasts.
Thanks for listening to the Compliance 911 Show. If you like the podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, please give us a like and review to help others find the show. As always, links are in the show notes, and you can always find us online at compliance911show.com. Follow M&M Consulting and Geodata Vision on LinkedIn for all the latest news and information on compliance hot topics.